as a young girl, I had a deep desire to be a young grandma. I didn't have grandmas growing up because they were passed away, and I had a lady that chose to kind of adopt us as a grandma. And I loved her. She had multiple sclerosis, and so for about 25 years, I watched her just deteriorate. What it did was it just laid its desire that I want to be young. I don't want to have to be facing some huge thing, and I want to be able to play with the grandkids and do all this stuff. And so this was going around in my head. So I knew in order to accomplish this, I needed to get some things in order. I need to figure out like who I was going to marry, and I convinced them to marry me. And then I needed to try and get pregnant because usually you have kids before you have grandkids. And so I had this whole plan. Well, I was fortunate enough to meet my future husband in college. And I tried to convince him to get married early before we finished college so we can get started. He refused. We had to wait till we graduated. And after we graduated, got married, and I was like, let's start trying to have kids because I love kids and this grandma thing's rolling around my head. And so off we go. We start trying to have children, and wouldn't you know it, that we would struggle with fertility issues. So this was a real bummer as we kind of walked through this because that gets your hormones all lit up, it gets your body all messed up, and it's like a roller coaster. So we're trying to get pregnant, trying different ways, doing all the doctors say. This went on for about 4+ years. Doctors gave us one last chance to get pregnant through a study at the Baylor College of Medicine. And we were on the actual medication and not placebo, and we had 3 tries. The first cycle comes around, and next thing you know, my monthly cycle comes in. I throw myself on the bed, and I'm like, I can't produce children. I'm not a good wife, and just woe is me. I just really wished I was dead because this was my identity, right? And I'm trying to figure my way in this. And so as I went along, my husband came home, and being the good guy that he is, he tried to help fix me. So go eat dinner when you're depressed. And I was just like, I'm going to be this way tonight. And tomorrow I will figure out how to pick myself up. What he did say was he said, we got 2 more tries. And I was like, okay. So we tried again the second month, no success. One last month, and we tried again. We went to the OBGYN. They did tummy ultrasound. They told me I was having 2 kids. We were elated because I want 4 kids, and this was going to be great. We just do them 2 at a time. It'd make it much faster. And I'm like, great, 2 kids. We're good. And off we went. We told all our family. We were so excited and a little overwhelmed because 2's more than 1, and that could be a little challenging. But off we go, and we managed, as we were talking to everyone, figure out like how we were going to do this. Because at that time, I'm the breadwinner and my husband's in graduate school. But we came up with, in our mind, we figured out how we could do it because I'm a go get it done girl, And so we have this plan. And around 13 weeks on my way up to my office building, I ended up bleeding everywhere. And I knew that most people miscarried in their first trimester. So I am like, oh, God, I got out of that first trimester. And at that point, we didn't have a bunch of cell phones. So it's not like I could just call a friend or call my husband. I had to go up to the office and then ended up talking to my new insurance, and they sent me to the emergency room to see what was going on. So get into the emergency room. Anything with fertility or high-risk pregnancies, things like that, it's always hurry up and wait. And I'm like, can't you do something to stop it? Like I'm in crisis, and they're like, just wait right here. I'm like, okay. My husband had caught up with me. They took us back. They confirmed that I was attempting to miscarry, but it looked like everything had kind of calmed down. And they could hear heartbeat. And they said, okay, you need to go home for the weekend and just lay around and rest up. And on Monday, go to your doctors. So off we went, still kind of a little worried, but we went home, laid around all weekend, took it easy. And Monday we got promoted to the high-risk doctor, the OBGYN. So we go to the high-risk doctor, and what do? So we're waiting in the lobby, and I look at my husband and I say, dude, we think I'm going to miscarry. And we're going to go in here for this ultrasound, and they're going to tell us we're having triplets. Wouldn't that be funny? And so we started laughing, and that was good. Went on back into the ultrasound room. The little ultrasound lady stuck the probe on me, and immediately I could tell that there was three. And I was like, oh, there's three. Now, remember, we had figured out everything that we were going to do. We had figured out how we were going to manage it. Three is a new level of complexity. And so my husband's sitting over on the side of the room shaking his head, just like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And so the lady does all their little measurements. She does a great job, super sweet. She says, let me get all the babies on the screen so we could take one shot for you with all of them in there. I was like, great. So as she moved everything around and she did that, I went, there is four. She was like, yeah. And I'm like, don't look for any more. I said, because anything above four is high risk. So it doesn't matter if there's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I don't care how many's in there. This is plenty. And my husband's now pacing the room because we certainly don't know how we're going to figure all this out. And this little lady did all her measurements. And then she's like, I need to get the doctor. Like, no joke. And so off she goes to get the doctor. The doctor comes in, super sweet little lady. I've never met her. She's like, yeah, there's 4 in there. And I'm like, okay. That's part of the reason I was attempting to miscarry was because I wasn't getting enough nutrition or water or anything to support all these babies. So I guess when they did the 2 different ultrasounds, they saw 2 different sets of kids originally, which is what is rather interesting. So she sits me up and she says, we'll figure it out. And we finish with her. We go back home. And by the end of the day, I've totally lost it. And I don't lose it very often, but I go home and by the time I get on the phone with my mom, I'm like, there's not 2, there's 4. And I'm like, I can't even get these kids home from the hospital. I can't get 4 car seats in my car and getting them home. And then how in the world do you feed all these things and try and diaper them? And how am I going to afford everything? And I just kept on going and kept on going. And then I was like, what about prom? How am I going to pay for all that? And then what about college? Well, how am I going to pay for all that? And then what if they're all girls and I have to pay for these weddings and cars? And I had their whole life rolling in front of me. And my mom said a very wise thing. She said, hey, why don't we just focus on today? And I was like, oh, that's a really good idea. I should calm down. And then my father got on the phone, and my father did something special. He's a man of very few words. And he got on the phone and he said, Daddy loves you, and I'll take care of you. And I was like, forget the husband. Thank you, Dad. I'm like, thank you. It's going to be all right. Now, my husband's very good at taking care of me, too. However, when your daddy says he's going to take care of you, that makes everything. So now we realize we have a pregnancy of 4, and making it to the next day is pretty darn amazing. So everything changed. Tons of food, tons of water. I was always in trouble because I didn't drink enough water. I'm like, I drank 16 gallons, but I'm like, and I still flunked my test. I'm like, come on. But we went on our merry little way, and our goal was to get to 30 weeks. So we're doing pretty good, and we're kind of figuring our way. My work was very flexible with us to allow me to work at home and to work there some. We don't know exactly how we're going to do it, but we're just making our way through. In around 23 weeks, I'm really big. And I tell my husband, let's go tour the hospital, your visit before you go, so we kind of know what all's going to happen, because I'm not going to be able to walk much longer. We got in the car, we headed down the freeway to the hospital, and as we were going, the traffic backed up and a car behind us hit us. And I remember, I don't feel very good. I don't know why I don't feel very good. I just don't feel very good. And so we dealt with the cops and got all that done. And I told my husband, I said, let's still go into the hospital. We're more than halfway there. Let's go. So off we went to the hospital. By the time we got to the hospital, I was like, I really don't feel good. And I can't feel anything. So I'm just like, I feel, and so he talked to the nurse and I'm like, can you please check me in the hospital? Because I need you to see if I'm having contractions, because I don't want to drive back to where I live, get on the contraction monitor to drive back up here. And I said, check it out. So I was having contractions about 2 minutes apart. So it was a good thing they checked me in. They hydrated me, got it all under control, and got everything calmed back down. I spent the night, and then they sent me home. But then we knew that to make it to the next day was a miracle. So we kept walking and kept going. And at 26 weeks, I woke up one morning at the house, walking around, and then there was water everywhere. And I was like, this is ridiculous. I'm not going to be able to hold my bladder anymore. I'm going to have to wear a diaper. I can't deal with this, And then it dawned on me that it wasn't my bladder. It was one of the baby's sacs had ruptured, or we thought that that's what it was. So you call the doctor. What does the doctor say? Come see me and wait. So we went to see the doctor, and on the way out the door, I told my husband, I said, hey, you need to go ahead and get my bag for the hospital, because if this is true, then they're going to put me in the hospital and they're not going to let me out until the boys are born. He was like, okay. So we got the bag, went to the doctor. They did the ultrasound. They confirmed that one of the sacs had ruptured and that I needed to go to the hospital. I was not prepared for the hospital, and they were not prepared for me. They didn't have a room ready. They don't know what to kind of do with me. And I'm like, I am going to jail. They're going to stick me in that bed. I'm not going to be able to get out. This is going to be horrible. And by the time I got to the hospital, I'm kind of losing it again, because I'm just like, oh my gosh, what is this going to be like? And how horrible is this? And I told my husband, I said, hey, I really want you to stay the first night with me. I said, I know you can't stay every night, but stay this night. And so he agreed to do that, but he had to run back to the house. And then I got on the phone with my mom, and I'm like, this is terrible. I've lost it, blah. And she's like, all right, you need to calm down. And she's like, we're in Mississippi. We'll get in the car in the morning and we'll drive. And we should be there 6 or 7 hours. I was like, okay. So my parents are coming. I'm like, Dad's coming. It's going to be all right, right? And so we made it through the night and went to sleep. And in the morning, what woke me up was the fact that I knew I was having contractions. I knew it. I looked at my husband and said, you need to get the doctor. So the doctor came in, checked everything out, and she said, well, the baby is like pushed their hand through your stitched cervix and is waving hello to the world. And so the baby's going to come. I remember, and I'm like, can you put the hand back and like, let's pretend that didn't happen. She was like, no, you're going to have to deliver the baby. And my husband asked her, well, what about the other 3? And she said, well, she's probably going to have to deliver them, but it will be determined based on what her body does after she delivers the first one. So they took me into surgery, took the stitches out, and then we waited again. A couple hours later, little Zach was born, and they took Zach and they put him in my arms. Unfortunately, Zach's lungs weren't developed enough for him to live long outside the womb. So he just simply laid in my arms till he passed into eternity. And I just held him and loved him and was his mom. Then the question became, what was my body going to do to see if I could keep the other boys? And they did some blood work. And by the time the blood work came back, my temperature was 103, 104. I was getting very sick. Blood work was way screwed up. And my body was just thinking that I had a foreign object now at this point in my body that it has to get rid of. I'm getting very sick, and they said, we're going to have to induce the other 3. So they induced the other 3, and those 3 boys came, and they placed them in my arms, and they slowly passed away into eternity. And there I sat, a young mom who should have gone to the hospital to be celebrating all the births and everything. And remember, my deepest desire is to be a grandmother. So I'm sitting in the middle of all this mess and all this pain. And in that night in the hospital room, I'm like, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to look or how to turn or what I'm going to do. And the only thing I could think to do was to just put a stake in the ground and say, Jesus, I'm going to trust you with this. I don't know how I'm going to do this. I don't understand. I just don't know anywhere else to turn. And so that was the decision I made sitting right there. Didn't know at that point what it really meant, but I just knew that that's the stake I put in the ground. What I found over the years is that when you and I are faced with a really hard situation, and in this case with the boys, the question that rises up in me and probably rises up in you is this question of why me? Why God? Why now? Why infertility? Why this love of children? Why this desire to be a young grandma? Why? I'm really good at that. Why? And God just whispered to me that he wanted me to give him my why. And I was like, why? I like my wife. I like it. And the reason I think I like it, and probably the reason people like their wives, is because it gives you something to hold on to when everything else seems like it's out of control, right? And so if I hold on to that, just wanting, demanding an answer, but you know what? There is no answer that any person or God himself could have given me that would have satisfied my why question, because it wasn't going to bring my boys back. It wasn't going to take away my pain. It wasn't going to solve my grandma problem. It wouldn't satisfy. So this side of heaven, there's no answer to why that satisfies. And what I've learned as I've gotten older is that, when I get to heaven, it won't matter, because there's no pain, no sorrow. My boys are there. Jesus is there. It's all good. It won't matter. So I opened my hands and I gave you my why question. And then I'm like, now what do I do? You just took that. What do I do with that now? And he's like, ask me a different question. And I was like, how do I survive? And it came down to a really simple truth. And the truth is this, is that I needed to breathe, and I needed to figure out for me at that moment, what was my next best step? Not my next right step, because right means that there's a possibility of me being wrong, and that might cause me to freeze because I'm worried. Am I doing the right thing, right? And so the next best step is whatever I can think of. And what happened is, when I obediently took the next best step, God was gracious to meet me there. And then he showed me what the next best step could be, and then he met me there. Let's be clear. Some days, next best steps look like pull the covers off my head, manage to brush my teeth, and get my butt dressed. And then other days, I might be able to get up and tackle some big task, or I might be able to go out for a walk. It's whatever's the next best one for you, because it is the progress of moving forward in obedience and trust. So what happened is, over a period of time, I started getting better. And I'm like, okay, what am I supposed to ask now? And he's like, now I want you to ask, how do I thrive? And that's a really sweet question, because when we ask that, what we were saying is, God, take my story, redeem my story, use it for your glory. So I started doing that. I was like, how do I thrive? I want to live. I don't want to be stuck. I want to live. And so how do I do this? And so he opened up doors for me to minister to other people who had lost children, lead grief groups, all kinds of stuff. But it also started us on this journey of adoption. So we have adopted 3 times. We have 9 children from adoption that come from hard homes. So I did get my children. Ultimately, I have 15 grandchildren now. And so I am a young grandmother, but it also led to me starting a ministry here where we live that impacts thousands of families every year. That ministry is about 15 years old, and then ultimately to writing a book to tell my story. But you know what? All these things that I've been able to experience, all these highs, never would have happened without the journey through the low of losing my boys. And so I would say, as an encouragement to you, are you very intentional about the days that you have? Because we're going to all have a legacy. It just depends on whether it's intentional or it just happens.